anyway, that was, oh yeah, then I stayed in the hospital for 3 months.
3 months in the hospital. And then, so you were well into the next school year by the time you got done.
Well, I had already decided I want to go to ANP school.
That's, what's ANP stand for?
Airframe and Power Plant. And so I think I had applied at Tacoma, Washington, which is Clover Park Technical Vocational School, which is what I did the next year. I was still on crutches.
So then, did you ever come back to work for the Forest Service?
No.
That was it? That was your...
Yeah, well, this doctor that took care of me, his name was Dr. Yost. I guess he's a Chinese guy, but he said, yeah, you can do it again. And I said, well, I don't think I have a chance. So I never did.
You never worked in retardant operations or any of that? So.
Well, I did too. Okay, so after my accident, I went to Grangeville and set up a borate plant.
During the winter?
No, it's during the spring and the summer the next year, I believe. Well, it was in between sessions at Tacoma, Washington, when I was going to school, so it would have to be in a vacation time of 3 months vacation. So I set that up and...
At the airport?
Yeah, and in the meantime, I was an Air Obsever. So I'd fly with Frank Hill, he was an operator there, or one of the pilots. And so we'd do the whole perimeter of the Nez Pierce National Forest. We'd go east, and then follow some sighting creek. In fact, a lot of times we land at Moose Creek. I remember one time the pilot, he said, asked me if I wanted to fly. And I said, well, sure, because I flew a little bit in the service, a J3 Cub, I somewhere in. So I was following the magnetic compass, and they have their magnetic load, I think, is in Canada, isn't it? And I believe in Grangeville it's about 21 degrees off. And I should have been following the radio compass. So they'd ask me my 10-20 every 15 minutes, and I'd give them some fictitious thing. Because I knew if I kept going south, I'd come to the Salmon River. So eventually we did. So that was kind of an experience there.
So when you set that retardant plant up in Grangeville, what did that consist of?
Well, they had a beer vat, or a beer barrel. I think they used to make beer in Missoula, if I'm not mistaken. It's the thing on the 4 legs. You have to put concrete pedestals under it. And then they had a flat bottom thing too. And each one, I don't know how much but at that time they had gotten away from borate. Borate is 13 pounds to a gallon, which is a white clay mixture. And then by that time they had a bentonite, which is kind of an orange, if you know what I mean. So they called me the Retardant Mix-Master. That's what I was. I had to mix up that stuff. And then one time I had to go to Missoula to get a 3-inch pump for the borate, and it would never work right. You had to prime the thing before it would work. And so they had this guy helping me, and he finally found out what the trouble was. It was a packing gland. So we tightened that packing gland, it worked just fine.
Well, what did you fill up a lot of aircraft or service a lot of aircraft with that?
Quite a few, yeah.
What were some of the aircraft that were flying retardant missions out of?
TBMs. I don't know if we ever had a Ford Trimotor, although there was one rigged up for drawing slurry. And we never had the big ones in there because the runway just isn't long enough.
So what do you remember about the TBMs? What could they carry?
600 gallons.
And then were there a lot of different aircraft that were TPMs or just the same one?
At Missoula, they had a Navy version of the B-24, which carried about, I think it was 2,000 gallons, which is about 26,000 pounds. And then they had a F7F or something like that. Oh, they had the B-25 or B-26, and that would carry 600 or 800 gallons. You know, a little bigger airplane, 2 engines, probably carried a little bit more. So,
when they ranged out of Grangeville onto a fire, how far, what was the radius that they would go? Would they go clear over to the other side of the wilderness area, or how far would they go to get a fire?
I have no idea. I remember though, one time they dropped a load on a fire and somebody got killed. And
on the ground?
yeah, and somebody from the headquarters told me, he said, be sure you mix that stuff up good, because, you know, he told me what happened. Well, that stuff will gel in the tanks, you know, on the way to a fire anyway. And I always figured I was doing my job pretty darn good. I never really blame myself on that. So.
Yeah. Do you remember any retardant aircraft accidents? There weren't any?
No, I don't recall anything.
Did you have any, did you hear in the pilots talk or around that, did you get in the sense of which aircraft were the best for retardant operations?
No, but I remember one time we had a party at the hangar in Grangeville, and there's a couple jumpers out there pushing a prop back and forth, you know. And one of the pilots on that TBM said, "That's not very smart." He said, "I might have left that mag switch on." You know, and of course it would have started, or it could have, you know, if you got to the right place on the magneto.
Yeah. Well, who did the repair work on those aircraft? When they were working, they would come back to Missoula and get repaired, or?
Well, they were out of Missoula anyway.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, see, they weren't stationed in Grangeville, not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
They just went there for the fire and then came back, I think.
So the repair operations were out of Missoula?
I think so.
Yeah.
Unless it was Boise, but I kind of doubt that.
What about, you mentioned that you set up a retardant operation in Dixie?
Yes. Yeah, I went down there and set up their operation too, and I had to ask an engineer on the pedestals about putting the rebar in the pedestals. And he said, well, you should keep that rebar 2 inches from the outside so it doesn't freeze and crack the concrete.
And then what were those tanks? Were they, what did that setup consist of?
Just a pump and probably a smaller tank, but they had the old, they call those World War II trainers, bi-wing airplanes.
B-13s?
Yeah, BT-13s. And they probably carried 100 gallons. But I remember one time they sent me up to the Salmon River to, I had the mixer with me. I pulled it behind the truck, and you had to crank it, you know. And I remember one time cranking that thing, crank had stuck in it. So it scared that thing would fly off, so I ducked around the corner and turned around, hit the switch to cut it off. And then they didn't use it anyway, so then on the way back to Grangeville, they had me stop at a little airport, I don't know, somewhere between Riggins and Boise, and they just had me dump it on the airport runway because they didn't need it there.
Well, can you take, I've never mixed borate, so how about telling me, you're sitting there, you got a couple of tanks, you got some aircraft coming in. Tell me, how did you have it ready, or did you have to mix it?
I always had it ready.
So what did you do to make borate or
you
the
had
later
these-
versions?
You had these 80-pound bags and you had to dump them in by hand.
Like cement?
Yeah. And I don't remember the portion of water to clay or bentonite or anything like that.
And
It
then-
was all done by hand.
But then you had the machine mixed it, or you did that, you mixed it by hand?
The machine mixed it, I think, if I remember right.
And then if you loaded 600 gallons onto a TBM, did that use up all your capability and you have to make more before it came back? Or?
Probably, yeah.
So you were working all the time once it got going?
Well, yeah, and if I wasn't doing that, a lot of times they had me aerial observing. And I never did find a fire. We found one fire one time, and it was a couple of goat herders. Usually if there's a fire, the pilot would spot it first anyway. It just seemed like that next year, you just didn't have fires like you did in '61.
Yeah.
And like I said in that letter, I never heard of wildfires in those days. It was either a gobbler or a spot fire. You know, of course with this global warming, it's only going to get worse, as you know. But you never heard of the word wildfire. And they wouldn't put jumpers on wildfires anyway, because normally they save you for the small ones so they don't get big.